Thank you. Awesome. Wow, we are live. I'm so excited. Hi, everybody. For those who don't know me, I am Tiara, aka T, your wine diva. I am a content producer. I am an entrepreneur and lover of wine. I'm super excited today because I have Bianca Bosker here, who is an award-winning journalist. She is the New York Times bestselling author of CORK DORK, and I'm so excited because I've been listening to the audiobook and I love it, love it, love it. And so I'm thankful that you decided that you were able to hop on here really quick and chat with me.
Thank you. This is so exciting. I love it. I really appreciate it. And thank you for listening to it. And I also just got to say, your earrings are the most incredible earrings anyone has ever interviewed me wearing. They're just so cool. So appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh my gosh. I make them myself. They're super easy to make. You just get like a little earring thing from Michael's and then a screw that has a hoop on it from like Home Depot, and you just like screw it into the cork and boom, it's done. Easy peasy.
Whoa, so cool. I mean, I've seen a lot of uses for corks, but the idea of turning them into earrings, it goes beyond. It's so cool.
I love it. Oh my gosh. So for those who might not know who you are, can you talk a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah. So I am probably most relevant for the context where we're talking about wine. I'm a writer, and I'm also a card-carrying sommelier, which was the kind of I'm not currently working the floor, but was the part of the journey that became CORK DORK. Was really I was the tech editor at HuffPost, and basically I discovered this world of cork dorks, and I was fascinated. I have always been obsessed with obsession, and there was something about this mania of these elite somms who just really rearranged their lives around the flavors of senses of taste and smell, who did crazy things in the name of wine expertise. I mean, licking rocks and studying all these flashcards and hiring voice coaches, memory coaches, just turning their lives upside down in the name of it. And that was really interesting to me, but was also really compelling was just the fact that, they had the sort of senses that I associate with drug sniffing dogs at airports, or bomb sniffing. I mean, I wanted to know if I could do what they did and what would change if I did. So yeah, anyway, that was sort of the beginning of me then becoming the author of the book CORK DORK, and training to become a CORK DORK. Yeah, I guess that's who I am. I live in New York. I don't know what else to say. I'm me.
I love it. I love it. Are you working on another book? I have a couple of people that have asked me to ask you that.
I am. Yeah, I am working on a new book, which is why I was a couple of minutes late. And you were so patient to wait for me. Yeah, and then I continue to write about wine, and I actually podcast about wine for a place called Prince Street. And so, and at the same time, I do write about other subjects. I write for The Atlantic, for example, and I write about everything from, dinosaurs to witches. But it's interesting when I embarked on this journey to, immerse myself in the wine world. I mean, I was interested in wine. I was curious about it, but I certainly was not a wine connoisseur, and I didn't love it. I mean, I was interested in it, but I really didn't know if, at the end of all of this, I actually would care about it. Would I become passionate about it? And in fact, I ended up obsessing over the things that the people who obsessed me obsess over. I mean, wine continues to be just a huge part of my life, and something that I feel like there are many stories still to tell about it.
I love it. So where can we find your podcast?
So it's not mine, but I do contribute to it. So it's called Prince Street, and it's online. It's, I think, everywhere you find your podcast, but it's called the Prince Street Podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. How did you get started writing?
Like in life, you mean?
In life, yes, in life.
Well, I think it may start from just being a really voracious reader. I have always I mean, I'm an only child. And so growing up, like, I think books were great companions, right? I mean, they were really wonderful friends. They ushered you into these worlds. And writing is also something that you can do alone, as opposed to playing board games and cheating at them, which is really was my favorite hobby when I was little. But it was harder to do alone. And, I think that I was really, I wrote when I was in college. So I, would write for local publications while I was in college, was getting paid doing that. And then, it's funny, when I graduated, I briefly detoured into a different industry. And when I say brief, it was extremely brief, like less than a year brief. And I realized that writing it was my passion. I mean, it was something, and nonfiction writing in particular, I think that it's sort of the way that I understand the world. I mean, in some ways, it's just, I think I'm also probably nosy, like that probably helps to become a writer. But I find people fascinating. I mean, I find people's stories fascinating. It's interesting. Like, I think I have a reputation among my friends for being, and I say nosy, it's like when I go to dinner parties, like I just pepper people with questions. And it's not because I'm interviewing them or writing about them, but I just genuinely find humans really interesting, like how we work, what motivates us, what we spend our hours doing. And I like kind of understanding the world. So I think some people understand the world through history or through scientific research or through business. And I think I really like understanding the world through other humans. And so writing is, for me, one way to do that, that I found. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good question. It's hard to think about. It's hard to like retrace your steps. It's a really, really good question.
Thank you. So you interviewed and talked to a lot of people in your book. How did you find or hear about these people?
Yeah, well, I think that again, it's kind of hard to retrace the steps. I think that oftentimes one thing leads to another. I mean, I think when I started out, I quit my job, right? I quit my job as tech editor and started training to become a sommelier. And that was really my goal. And it evolved into this goal of working the floor as a som. And I didn't know how to do any of those things. And so some of the people that I first began talking to, it just grew out of, I'm at point A, I want to get to point Z. And who are the people who have done that, right? Who can tell me how it's done, what I need to know? And so that really began with talking to sommeliers, people who actually have gone through that process themselves to get their advice. And from there, I guess in some ways it kind of spun out of control, right? I mean, for example, like as I was training, so as part of my work, or as part of my training, I was in these blind tasting groups and I had som mentors, and I developed these som mentors because other sommeliers were telling me that that's how they did it themselves. And so, as I was spending more time with them, I became cognizant of, I should say one thing that I became aware of was that there were these tried and true traditions of palate training that have been passed down through generations of sommeliers, but there were little inconsistencies with those as well. For example, I remember one of my mentors telling me that you can taste, sweet, the tongue map, right? The tongue map was this tried and true thing. You could taste sweet on the tip of your tongue, sour on the sides. And in fact, that's not true, right? If you look at the scientific literature, that has been debunked. We've known that for decades, that that's not quite right. And so from there, I started wondering, what else the science have to tell us about palate training? You know, what might those disciplines and the cutting edge research tell us about how any of us can really learn to savor with these senses? And so from there, I started speaking to sensory scientists, to neuroscientists, to, you know, people studying the chemical senses. You know, a lot of these things, one thing kind of led to the next, led to the next. Sometimes it was just a question in my mind of, you know, well, where did tasting notes come from? Why are we using this terminology of, you know, green bell peppers and flowers to describe the smell of wines? And that led, of course, to, you know, someone that invented tasting notes. Or, but a lot of it also came from being really open to being surprised. You know, I think that I do think a lot of it is just saying yes, is also being having a lot of humility to sort of, I find oftentimes, you know, in writing, for example, if I'm working on an article, I'll often find that I've done enough interviews and I know exactly what I need to know. And then maybe someone else gets back to me, or I hear one more name, and you know, I'm like, fine, like I'll just make time to do it, even though I feel like, oh man, like another one. And oftentimes it's like, that'll be the one that just blows your understanding to the next dimension. And so I think that it's just, you can't rush it. And that can be really tough, but I don't know. I mean, maybe you find it as well with your conversations that you have. I don't know, that like, yeah, I guess sometimes it's being greedy, you know?
Yeah,
It's like
just wanting more and more.
Exactly. Yes, you do know what it's like. There you go. Yeah.
So did you have in mind that you were going to write this book when you started your journey to become a sommelier?
So I am, like a lot of writers, I think, have this sort of, I don't know if it's a kind of egotistical, narcissistic, I don't know, voyeuristic sickness, but you know, this idea of a lot of things that I do, I'm like, this could be a story. Like I'm kind of annoying to travel with, because I feel like I go on vacation and I always turn it into like reporting something that like, this is going to be a piece. And so, you know, I think that there was that part of me that was like, maybe this will be a story or something, you know, that saw the potential to write about it. But, you know, to be honest, it was something I had to do. I mean, it was this journey that I felt like I needed to go on no matter what. I mean, the point of, you know, I think that there's things in life that sometimes find you and stir up something that you have managed to bury very deep inside. And I think at that point in my life, I'd spent 5 years writing about tech, which was really, you know, all day, every day at a screen, writing about things that happen on screens, and then going home, like I think a lot of us, and then hanging out on screens, whether it's Netflix or Instagram, or just so much of this life that's lived through like this two-dimensional, very sterile format. And I think that there was something about this world of people who lived for these sort of forgotten senses of taste and smell that fascinated me. And it made me realize that there could be much more. And so there was this, I couldn't go back from that. You know, I think that the question that it replanted in my mind was so fundamental that it was something I needed just to pursue and to see what would happen. Yeah. I don't know. What was your journey to wine? I mean, I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
For you, like, what was the thing that, because I do think that everyone has the thing that does for them, but yeah, what about you?
For me, okay, so it was a weird journey to wine. I feel like I started off with like my college roommate. And I guess her parents used to just allow her to have like little sips of wine, like growing up. And so it wasn't like a big deal thing where like in my house, like no one ever had wine. Like I'm the first person to drink wine in my family, I feel like. And, so at that time I was like, whatever, don't like it. And then I went to Italy to tutor English. And all of the host families that I stayed with, it was like, what you do is you have wine with dinner. Like you have to have wine with dinner.
Yeah.
And that's where my appreciation kind of came from. And just like doing it over and over and over again, I got the practice of trying wine and smelling it and tasting it. And eventually I got into the industry and like merchandising and network marketing with wine. And like, now it's just like, I want to know more. I want to know all the things and meet other people that in this industry and kind of make it so much more approachable. And like, that's kind of my goal, is that I talk to so many people who love wine or love the idea of like drinking wine, but they don't know where to begin and don't know where to start, or they have this like feeling that it's so, you have to be a certain kind of person to be able to enjoy it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I think that there's, I think in the US and maybe elsewhere, but I think I know the US best, obviously. There's a fear of wine. I think that there's, wine is something very scary somehow. And I find that interesting. I mean, I think that I was completely guilty of that. And I have even experienced it. I mean, the wine world can be really scary and it can be really intimidating. And I guess I do sort of wonder though, when did that happen, right? How did wine become scary? Like if you think about it, and one of my, I write about Paul Greco, who I worked with, who runs a restaurant, Terroir here in the city. And he, he talks about it, wine, it's grape juice with alcohol. I mean, it is this thing that should make us feel pleasure and happy. And yet it can feel, I mean, I still get a sweaty palm sometimes when I have to pick the wine for a table of people, but I don't know. Do you have any thoughts? Like why? How did it get to be scary?
I feel like there's a class distinction sometimes when it comes to wine. And if you're not a part of that class, then you don't get to understand it or whatever. But I think also when you go into a tasting room and people don't make you feel welcome, have you ever had that kind of experience of everyone's like swirling and sniffing and you're like, it tastes like grape juice. And like, just because you don't know. And if people aren't open armed and willing to share and give you some insight and kind of guide you along that way, and rather than like kind of just shutting it down, like, why don't you know? Then I think that's kind of, some people have that experience and then they're completely turned off from it. And they're like, well, I'm going to go drink beer or vodka soda, whatever. And like, that's going to be that.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And I think that there's, 1,000%. I think that there's oftentimes this attitude within wine of like, there's no right answer, but there's a wrong answer.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
And I think that there's sometimes, I remember having these experiences of also feeling sometimes like it could go too far in this other direction of being, it's entirely subjective, right? Like, don't worry about whatever you're feeling is the right feeling, and there's no rules, and don't worry about it. And I think that I found that frustrating because I also felt like, but clearly some people are getting more out of this than I am, and I understand that, and I do really fundamentally believe that it is subjective, right? That each of us, will bring our own tastes and preferences, and those preferences could change. I mean, they change person to person, but within the same person, they could change day to day. I mean, they could change hour to hour. I'm sure there's a glass of wines that you've enjoyed the first few sips, but maybe something changes, and you don't finish it, right? Or you don't like the last few sips. But I think that there are also things that we can do to, like, I mean, at least for me, I felt that part of my journey was like really understanding how to use my own sensory apparatuses or apparati, whatever the right term is. Like, I think that there, we all taste and smell, but really understanding how to, again, savor with these things, how to tune into these senses that we tend to dismiss. Like, those are things that you can do. Any of us can teach ourselves to smell better. But I think most of us have never really bothered to do so. And so I think that, that there's, there kind of this tension. I mean, to me, it's like when you think about our obsession with food and eating out and, buying, I don't know, or heirloom tomatoes or foraged pea shoots or whatever it is, right? I mean, we really focus on finding things that taste better, but we don't teach ourselves, I would argue, to taste well. And I think that is really, to me, the kind of foundation for a good relationship with wine. And it really is the foundation. It starts far before you start memorizing grape varieties or wine regions or vintages. It's just really learning to understand what does a leaf smell like? What does pepper smell like? What does dirt smell like? What does urine smell like? And you can do that on the subway. You can do that in your shower. You can do that. I'm not talking about the urine part. I mean, I guess you could, but I guess I mean more just the, like smells, right? Like the stimulus of smells. Right. It doesn't have to be something all that precious. It could really just be, as one of my a perfumer I worked with told me, I mean, just describe the smell of every aroma you encounter over the course of the day. Those words, lock that in. It gives you these sensory memories that you can then use to pick more out of a glass of wine.
I think, like you said in your book, where we're so practiced in like your eyes and like, what is this color and that kind of thing. But like, no one really talks about, so what does this smell like? Or no one's holding anything up to your nose as like a 3-year-old and says, this is cinnamon or whatever.
Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, there are schools that do it, but not, I mean, traditionally, actually, I think it's been in France where they had these classes about like learning to taste, which is so wonderfully French. I love it. But we have not had that. Most of us, I should say. I mean, my elementary school didn't have classes on, smelling cheeses, unfortunately.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Right? I know. So it's never too late. You can do your own class for yourself.
I'm like starting to like smell my spices and all that kind of stuff. I'm really trying to. I'm like that weird person in the grocery store smelling the fruit.
Yeah, totally. No, and it's funny. There's a little bit sometimes of a stigma against it. I think that it's considered rude, which is so sad. But I love, when I eat food, like I'm constantly smelling it. And I think sometimes there's this idea that if you smell it, maybe it means it's because you think there's something wrong with it. And it's not. It's just because you get more bang for your buck, and B, it's pleasurable. It's information. Yeah. It's just, it's a richer experience.
Exactly. So where are some of your favorite wine places to visit?
You mean regions or restaurants or?
Let's do both.
Yeah. Well, I would say in New York, I mean, Terroir is still one of my all-time favorite places to drink wine. It's just, there's a huge range of things. You can, there's kind of something for every budget. There's something from all over the world. It is a journey. It is unexpected. It's unpretentious. It's fun. I'm very lucky. I mean, I think that New York is, and I'm biased, but I think one of the best places to drink wine because there's very little, although there is obviously New York State, there are New York State wines, there's very little loyalty. I mean, I think you go to places like, I grew up in Oregon. Oregon has its own amazing wine scene. And so there's a little bit more loyalty maybe to the home team. And I just think New York is like, it's just
melting pot.
Yeah, it's everything, right? You can go, you find orange wine. I mean, you just almost everywhere you'll find like a weird selection. There's tons of places in the city that I love, but Terroir holds a very special place in my heart. In terms of places in the world, well, I grew up in Oregon, and I was back there recently, and there's a place called there's a winemaker. It's called Teutonic, and they have one of their I think it is their winery that's an urban winery, so it's in Portland itself, and the guy who runs it is an absolute nutcase genius. I don't know, I met him once and drank wines with him, and it was just really fun. It was one of those people who, again, has a very just unpretentious take on wines, and the wines are delicious. My dream place to drink wine is in Slovenia. I love the wines from Slovenia, and I have a fantasy of going and just like throwing myself at the feet of winemakers there and just like apprenticing myself to them, because I think that there's something, I'm also biased in that sense. My mom's, my other side of the family originally was from Slovenia, and so maybe there's some special connection, I don't know, that makes me love the wines. But I do find that they're really exciting and soulful. But then there's so many places, it's funny now that you asked that question. So Paul, who I worked for, used to make people promise to never drink the same wine twice. And I initially thought that was totally insane. But I realized that there's a certain logic to it because, there's more wines than you could ever try in your lifetime. And
Oh yeah.
and I think that I think of it sort of like books, right? Where there's some books that you read over and over again, and they change a little bit each time you read them. But there's also more books than you could ever read in a lifetime. And I think that I don't know, recently I just think that I'm always interested in trying the thing I haven't tried. And so to me, when I think about the places that I'd love to drink wine or visit, it's like I can't help but think about the places I haven't been. Lebanon, right? Like drinking wine in Lebanon. I mean, I can't even picture it. It sounds so exciting. And so it's, I don't know. But I think it's, I don't know. What about you? Where would you most want to go that you haven't been to drink wine? What's your wine fantasy?
I think I'm thinking Spain. I want to do just a cava trip.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's a great idea. I love it. That's so cool.
And then although I did learn my love for wine in Italy, I never really went officially wine tasting. So I want to go to Tuscany and just redo Italy, because for me that was a teaching trip, not so much a wine expedition. So I want to go, and I want to go with friends and just go up and down, and then South Africa.
Wow, those are all great. Love it. Those are all amazing. That's so great. I want to come on this trip that you're putting together.
You're more than welcome. Anyone can come. Come along. I love it.
Cool. Yeah. And I should say that I think Becca just commented, I was just noticing at the Finger Lakes, I'm really embarrassed to say, I haven't done an in-depth, it's right here. I actually have spent time in New Jersey trying New Jersey wines, but I need to do, but no, you're right. And Italy is a toughie because there's so many subregions and varieties. And from Sicily to Tuscany to Piedmont, to the Venezia, Giulia. These things are. It contains multitudes, in short. So I think people have, and you could dedicate a lifetime just to studying Italy's wines.
Oh, that would be amazing. That would be a great lifetime. I even just thought about Bordeaux has apparently a new amusement park of wine, and I want to do that. There's so
amazing. Amazing.
What are your tips for anyone that's aspiring to get into the wine world?
Well, as a professional or as a civilian?
I think let's start civilian and then go to professional. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would say that going back to what I mentioned before, I think that before you, start making wine flashcards and, memorizing differences between Tuscany and Sicily and Piedmont, I think it really starts with getting up close and personal with your own senses, right? I think that I at least had this experience of drinking wine, and this was before all of this, where someone would say, oh yes, well, this was aged in oak barrels, and this was this, that, the other, and this was 7 months in new oak, and this was 7 months in French oak, and 8 months in American oak, and I just had no idea what even oak tasted like, right? It didn't really mean anything. There was just that information just beat it off of me, and so I think a really important fundamental thing is, let's start with the sense of smell, right? You're never going to smell raspberry in wine if you can't smell raspberry and raspberry. And when you look at this language of tasting notes, right, we tend to talk about wines in terms of the kind of things that you can find at your supermarket. That's no accident. As I talk about in CORK DORK, there was, Ann Noble, who was at the University of California, Davis, was sort of the inventor of this modern tasting note. She came up with this idea of a lexicon based in these organic things. And it is a language, I think anyway, so there's, I think that's really helpful, right? That trying to, you could download, for example, or purchase the wine aroma wheel and begin smelling your way through those things. Again, it's about building your sense memory. So smell lemons, limes, different kinds of apples, smell apple skin, smell the core of the apple, smell the apple, with your nostrils, but also smell it orthonasally in your mouth, right? We have two chances to smell things. So take a bite of that apple, chew it up, kind of, try and kind of breathe air in and out of your mouth as you're chewing. Because again, and I have seen this, if you slice the human head open this way, there's actually a passageway in the roof of your mouth that connects back up into the nasal cavity. So you have more chances to smell that way. Smell dirt, taste dirt, lick rocks, smell what grass smells like. Again, put words on it. That will lock it in. And that will then allow you to sit down with a glass of wine and identify what's inside it. And so that's the next thing. I think it's important to really start by wrapping your mind around the so-called noble grape varieties to get sort of your foundation. Start with like Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Grigio or Chardonnay or Pinot Noir or Cabernet Sauvignon, and drink only one of those varieties from Australia, France, Spain, you name it, until you've really mastered, what does Sauvignon Blanc taste like and how does it change as it moves? You'll find certain things in common. Maybe get your book or go to Wine Folly and get a sense for what are the sort of trademark aromas of that particular grape and look for those things or sniff for those things. Likewise, taste. I think we talk about sort of the analysis of the wine on the palate, right? And a lot of that has to do with structure, which is this, whereas the smells can sometimes be more poetic, sometimes bullshit. The structure is often, these are these like measurable elements in a wine. Familiarize yourself with them. Things like the acidity, right? Feel how a high acid wine makes you drool. It makes you salivate. Sweetness, whether the wine is dry or sweet. First of all, know that the word dry technically, it's very confusing. This drives me sort of crazy, but dry technically means no sugar. It does not mean drying, which is technically the tannins, that kind of astringency of the wine. So all of those things, feel it for yourself. Know what tannins feel like, the way they are, that kind of dry mouth, like astringent feeling. Know what alcohol feels like. To me, it's that I feel for how far back it burns, right? The further down to my throat it burns, the higher the alcohol of the wine. And I think that's really important because going back to this idea of intimidation, I think that the wine world too often tells people what to taste instead of teaching them how to taste. And so I think that that is, learning those feelings for yourself is, I don't know, for me, I felt like developing, getting in touch with my sense of taste gave me more confidence in my taste in all things. You know what I mean?
It became a bigger experience, a more like richer experience.
A more richer experience, and one that I think kept me from outsourcing my opinions. I think I felt part of what blind tasting does, right? And you've probably experienced this, is for me, it teaches you to stay true to your own felt experience of something, right? You're not relying on price, you're not relying on context or label or, all these other cues that, there are information, but they can also sometimes play to our biases. And so blind tasting, again, it's about clearing that all out and getting in touch with your senses of taste and smell to really be honest what you personally are thinking and feeling and experiencing. And I think that can actually, you can have real breakthroughs in doing that.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, decide that you suddenly like things that you thought you didn't. So yeah, that I guess would be my first advice, and then drink. Keep track of what you like. I mean, I use an app. I use Delectable, and at the very least, pay attention to what was the grape, what kind of grape was used, and what general part of the world did it come from. And that's very helpful to you then when it comes to picking wines. I mean, it all depends on what your end goal is. Is the end goal just to feel comfortable? Picking a wine at a restaurant or feeling like you're getting your money's worth, or is it about diving into the journey? Because I do think there are so many adventures to be had in a glass of wine. I think for me, there's something so magical about the fact that when you open up a glass of wine, open up a bottle of wine and pour yourself a glass of wine, you can travel through space and time in that glass. You can travel back in time, you can travel to countries you've never been to. There's something so exhilarating about smelling Lebanon. I've never been to Lebanon, but I can kind of smell it in some ways through wine. It's a grape. It comes from the earth. I don't know. It's a thrill. It's so
Amazing.
exciting. Yeah.
Okay, final question. If like you could do it all again, would you do it all again?
Oh yeah. I mean, a million times. It's been absolutely, no question. And for so many, many different reasons. But I think that I mean, to me, it was a journey that has changed not only how I experience a glass of wine, but really how I experience life. I mean, I think when I'm, it's so funny. I mean, I'm so aware, just as a small example, I mean, I'm so aware of smells. I'm so aware of how that changes my mood. And I mean, again, I think to me, it goes back to, and not to sound maybe overly sappy, I don't know, but I think, I feel like we have a finite amount of time on this planet. And to me, this journey into the senses has really made me feel like I can get more out of each sort of day, that there's more, right? There's more information, there's more beauty, there's more nuance. And I take excitement from that. And by the way, drinking wine is a lot more fun. So,
oh, of course.
Yeah, and it should be. I mean, I think it's and it's allowed me to, going back to you were asking about writing. I mean, it's allowed me to meet and spend time with really incredible, inspiring humans. And I think that is, at its essence, one of the great things about wine is it should be shared. It should be something that brings people together. It's allowed me to meet you. I mean, it's allowed me to talk to these incredible, everyone who's listening here and tuning in and commenting and sharing their perspectives. It's that's such a gift. It's really precious.
It's amazing. Yeah. Felicia says, you'd even give up wine or give up coffee again?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I'm glad I gave it up at the time, but I will say that I have now, so it's funny, as I was writing, I was like, I mean, I was desperate. It was very hard to write without coffee. And so I started drinking coffee again. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because I realize now I'm so horribly addicted to caffeine. I mean, if I don't have it within a certain amount of time, I get a horrible headache. So maybe I should give it up again. I don't know. I think maybe there was something to that. But it's funny, even salt. Yeah. So I used to, because I also gave up adding extra salt to my food. And that actually, it's really changed how I eat. Like I still, I think there's a lot of food now going out to eat. There's so much food that's just too salty. I think and that was not the case before. I mean, before I literally was drinking soy sauce as though it were soup. I mean, it was just, yeah. But I have one last, I have a question for you, which is, what are you excited about drinking right now? I don't know. I'm always curious. Like, are there
what am I excited?
Yeah. Like, are there any wines that you, or regions or things that are I don't know, really, really exciting for you right now?
Well, right now I'm like really into Chenin Blanc.
Great. So love it.
That's what and I do this like Wine 101 Wednesday thing inside a Facebook group with like me and a couple of friends, and we like try different wines every week. And so like Chenin Blanc is what we're like focusing on this week. So I'm excited to kind of just try and like go on that journey and kind of pick a new wine every week. Before I was very much on the, like, I'm just marketing it, I'm drinking it and like moving on to life, but like really kind of getting that experience. So I feel like I'm kind of just like starting over and being more locked into my wine journey.
Yeah, that's great. I love Chenin Blanc. I think it's also very versatile. It can be like rip your teeth off acidic, but it can also be, there's off dry Chenins that are really good with like Thai food. But I love it. And to me, it's so characteristic. I always think of a sheep holding a pineapple. Like it has this, on the one hand, very tropical to me notes, but also this like wet wool kind of earthiness to it. It's a bonanza, really.
I love that. I think the other thing I'm most excited about is just trying to like come up with those kind of descriptors of like like learning to not just say like what's written, like the vintner's card or whatever, but like actually trying to put my own, like, this is like I don't know, Mary Tyler Moore on a, I don't know, but like kind of coming up with something like that that really can resonate with other people outside of just what like wine speak is.
Absolutely, totally. And I think, yeah, I'm a big proponent of that. And I think that, there's times I've probably taken it too far. But sometimes it's helpful. I mean, Morgan, who I write about, has the best tasting notes that just come out of left field. And they're like, it's a cashmere blanket, it's a stiletto heel, it's a this. It's just great. I just noticed, by the way, I think is it Felicia, who just mentioned Croatian wines in the comments. Also, I am also find Croatian wines extremely exciting. I had my first kind of deep dive this summer, and there's no going back. I'm totally, I'm a believer. It's great. Yeah. And I think, is it Nick or Lori? Yeah, Lori, who had asked about the shape of wine glasses and whether that makes a difference. And I want to touch on that. I'm sure I've taken up way too much time, but I want to touch on that because that's a really great question, which is just to say that, and I don't know if you have a perspective on this. I'd love to hear your take. I had this question myself because there are so many different glasses that are on offer. Everything from, people will sell you a glass for young Bordeaux and old Bordeaux and a Riesling versus a Chardonnay versus a Chenin versus a Port, all these different glasses. And I will say that I then looked into, there's a surprising amount of scientific research that has been done on this subject. And what the research indicates is that a wine glass is better than a water glass or a mug. And generally, though, what you really want is a glass that's going to be wider, like a wider circumference around the middle and a narrower circumference at the top. So I can't really do this. But beyond that, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of evidence, and of course many glassmakers will dispute this, but that there's a huge provable difference. So I mean, my feeling is I do think that the glass, some people have a preference. I have friends that have very thin glasses, which are just a joy. They are really nice to drink out of. They're like miraculously thin, but weigh that against how likely you are to break them if you're like me. And so I think there's a holistic pleasure that you have to take into account. And part of that is the pain of breaking them on a regular basis. But in general, what I would say is that if you have a glass, you have a wine that you want to showcase and enjoy, I would recommend investing in like a stemmed glass, something that again is wider around the middle, narrower at top. It does affect the way that it seems alcohol evaporates from the glass and just allows you to better experience the aromas of that wine. But if you need to drink it out of a water glass, or that's what you have, like we're all human. So
yeah, but do you, boo? I completely agree with that. I think the other thing that I've noticed in glassware is just like crystal stems versus just straight up glass. Doesn't really like the shape, as you said, as long as it's bigger in the middle and it kind of tapers off and gets closer at the top, so it can angle the aromas up into your nose when you're sniffing and all that good stuff. But the crystal, I find that I can get a little bit more flavor out of than just standard glass. But other than that, yeah. That's all I got.
And I think, a clean glass, that would be a good one, right? Like,
have it clean.
I'm always having to check mine before I serve them to people because sometimes they don't get as clean as I intend for them. But I think that's interesting. I'll have to try it. I haven't tried. You mean like the crystal, like the bowl itself, or more the stem?
The bowl itself.
Interesting. Cool. Well, I'd love to. This is a great experiment to do. Maybe that's why there's so much research. But get some wine and see how it tastes. I love it. I'm in.
Just do like a line of it. Let's do it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Ooh. Felicia said something about a winery in Croatia where you can scuba dive for the wine.
I have not heard about that.
I think it's the wine on like the wine show or something like that on Hulu. Cool. I saw that, and they go in and they go under, and like the wine, that's where they store it, that's where they age it, they put it in the bottle and they put it under the sea, and then you got to go scuba dive and get it, and it's got all of this like minerality and like salt salinity in it, and it's like kind of crazy.
That's amazing. I would love to try it. Again, just add it to the experiment that we're doing. I don't know.
I love it. Okay. I'm sure I've killed so much of your time, but thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure. It's an honor, and I'm very grateful. And it's a pleasure to talk to you. And it's so nice to see so many amazing, engaged questions and listeners. Thank you to everyone who's also listened. I think it was Christopher who said he loved the book. Thank you. Everyone who has read the book or listened to the book, I consider a friend. Like it means just so much. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm a reader. I feel like I'm someone who I felt books just touch my life in really deep ways. And so just to know that someone else has read what I've written is a huge compliment. You are all my best friends. Thank you. You may not know it, but in my book, you're my best friends.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your story. I love it so much. Is there anything else that you want anybody to know or share?
Just that I'm grateful. And if everyone ever wants to reach out, I'm B. Bosker on Instagram and on Twitter. And you can reach me at bianca.bosker@me.com if you ever want to drop me a note. But no, thank you. And thank you for helping to make wine. Hopefully it will no longer be so scary to us all.
I hope. Fingers crossed. Thank you so much.
And thank you for the jewelry inspiration. So glad to know what to do with I love that because come on, there's corks that you have that you don't know what to do with, but they're special or they have a memory. So here, I got to take a picture of this because I just think it's so great. So yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. And cheers to you and cheers to everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Bye.